effective communication. You know, as we think about ways that we can improve our skills as coalition leaders, really, I was thinking so much about communication and how when we work on this a little bit, we can really move forward in capacity and sustainability and all of those things that are so important to our coalitions being really effective. So what I'd like you to do is think today about maybe what some of your concerns or challenges have been with communication in your organization in meetings. So let's talk today a little bit about what the difference is between internal and external communication, how we can promote strong communication practices in both of those areas. We'll talk through some helpful tools, and certainly if you've had success in addressing one of the challenges that one of the folks has shared this morning on in concerns, please feel free to share what's worked for you. Type it in the chat, or you can come off of mute and just share that out loud as well. So that's the plan for today. I love thinking about communication in terms of it's a skill that we can learn. You know, sometimes we think people are either naturally good communicators or bad communicators, but really this it's a set of tools, it's a set of practices, and the more we work at it, the better we will be. And the better we are at communicating, it really does improve the quality of every part of our life. So let's talk about the ways or the arenas in which we communicate. So we've got internal communication and external. And for internal communication, that is when we've got communication taking place within an organization. So that'll include both our official communication, like your memos, your policies, your newsletters, and then also some unofficial or informal communication that occurs among and between board, staff, volunteers, participants. So you think about sometimes we have meetings, and then sometimes we have meetings after the meetings. I'm not sure if that's familiar to anyone, but that's certainly been my experience in working in nonprofit, where, you know, after an official board meeting, folks will have another meeting in the parking lot or in the break room to go deeper in a particular topic, or to see if they really understand what's going on. So that's what we're talking about in terms of internal communication. Then that external communication, this is when we're talking about sharing information outside the organization. So things like your organized campaigns, your public relation efforts, your media releases, your social media, that can also include the information that flows informally through your collaborators, partners, and the rumor mill. So not sure if anybody has to deal with a community rumor mill, but I've certainly experienced that in my nonprofit work over the years. So external communication is something that you can influence, but not necessarily control sometimes. So we'll want to talk about how we can manage our skills in both of those areas. But we're going to start by talking about internal communication first. So I want you to think about a few ways that that people use internal communication in your organization. So, you know, maybe share in the chat a couple of ways that you communicate to people inside. So this could be your internal to your coalition or internal to the staff. Email for sure. Talking and sticky notes. You know, it's funny that you mentioned sticky notes, Felicia, because I just stuck a sticky note up on the window that faces from my office into the hallway saying webinar in progress, because the last time I was doing a webinar, I was accidentally interrupted by one of my fellow staff members who walked into my office and started asking me a question. And she and I both laughed as we realized what was going on. Oh, Google Hangout. Yeah, that's a great tool for doing internal communication. So you get a little ping notification that, hey, somebody needs a question answered or has a thought to share. So sticky notes, meetings, phone calls, you know, and I like in this slide as well, thinking about the lunchroom sign. I think sometimes the signage that we use in our office space also is a way that we communicate to one another. So, you know, you may have seen signs posted like, your mother doesn't work here, so do your own dishes, or something like that in some office spaces, or notes about how to use certain tools, or to turn the heat up or not turn the heat up. So there are definitely ways that we practice talking to one another internally to share what's important in our organization. So as we think about ways that we can promote strong internal communication within our coalition, within our groups, I want to talk about this in 3 primary areas. The first is in developing an organizational climate and culture that supports strong internal communication. The next is talking about clearly defining who we're talking about, what, when, and by whom. And then the third thing will be about having some supportive systems that will help you to promote strong internal communication. So the first one is maybe the hardest, but we're gonna tackle it first, and that's climate and culture. So sometimes we might think about our culture as an iceberg. We have our visible organizational culture. That's the things that are above the water, and all of that is the way we say we get things done. We also have an invisible organizational culture that's below the water, and that's the way that we really get things done. So I think in terms of when we're thinking back to some of your concerns around people not coming to meetings or not being present at the table, that maybe we say we have all of these people at the table and that's the way we say we get things done, but the way we really get things done is not everybody's there. And so we wind up having to do a lot of backtracking, additional communication, additional work to get people informed enough to be able to do the work well. So in terms of doing things to support a strong internal communication climate and culture, here are some things that we want to talk through. First of all, we want to practice what we preach. So we align our values and actions. And as difficult or challenging as it can be, in terms of having people come to meetings who are not informed because they didn't attend, they didn't read minutes ahead of time, you know, for whatever reason, to really actually not go backwards during your meetings to get 1 or 2 people caught up, but rather to set some intentional time aside to say, I'd be happy to catch you up after the meeting. For now, we have to move forward. I realize that's easier said than done sometimes, depending on the power dynamics and who it is that's showing up late or uninformed to the meeting. But having meeting time be treated as really special time and time that you can really only do what you can do because those people are in the room, I think is really critical to have your values and your actions aligned. So whenever possible, you know, start your meetings on time, don't backtrack, stick to the agenda. And over time, we do help people learn how to come to a meeting, to bring their full self and to be really engaged in that. So the next one then is to use the platinum rule. So I don't know if you've heard of the platinum rule before, but it's a little bit different from the golden rule. So the golden rule says treat others the way that you would want to be treated. And the platinum rule instead says treat others the way that they want to be treated. So when we think about this in terms of communication, I think this kind of goes back to what Felicia said is in terms of a challenge. where, you know, sometimes I assume everybody knows what's in my head, but in fact, they don't. And so they want to be treated as though I am going to give the information to them in the way that they can receive it best. So I know which of my colleagues prefers to get an email, which prefers to get a text, which prefers to get a note, a handwritten note, or a piece of paper that they can visually hold on to. So in terms of being able to communicate with them the way that they need to receive that communication, one of the things that one of my coworkers did hear from me when I started was really valuable. And she said, "Hey, I just wanted you to know, I often check email late at night. So I might respond to you late at night, but I'm certainly not expecting a response back at 10 or 11 o'clock at night." So, you know, she laid it out very clearly that she would be communicating in a way, but didn't expect anything, didn't expect late night responses from me. That was really helpful. So now I know more about how she prefers to communicate. So that being sensitive to your own and other styles of communication, I'll give you a really good example for meetings. Sometimes we think, well, I'll just have a brainstorming session in the next meeting, and I can just bring this up at the time of the meeting, and everybody will be able to generate some ideas. Now, some people are really good at thinking on their feet. They love the excitement and challenge of being presented with a topic, and they just can go with it. But other people need to ruminate a little bit. They need to kind of put it in the crock pot of their brain and let it stew overnight to have some ideas bubble up to the surface. So if you are thinking you might want to do brainstorming for, let's say, a new event or a new outreach for your coalition, it's perfectly fine to say, just wanted to give you a heads up, we'll be talking about this topic in the meeting in the next week or so, or, you know, in the next day or so, to give those people who like to think about things ahead of time time to think about it. And then for the other folks, they can you know, just jump in off the top of their head and they'll be good to go. So that's one way that you can be sensitive to different styles of communication. Being culturally sensitive, you know, different parts of the world have different expectations for things like holding eye contact, having response time to questions, for people who might wait to be called on in meetings, who don't feel comfortable just speaking out. So you know your area best, and think it through if there are some different cultural considerations that you might need to take into consideration as you develop your communication internal to your coalition. And the last one is to make sure that your information flows in all directions. So, so this is making sure that the information is going from member to member, from members back to staff, from in between staff members, and to whichever key stakeholders that you might need to be in contact with, so that you're really communicating as strongly and as effectively as you can internal to your organization. So after we do all of that great work in establishing a strong climate and culture for strong internal communication, we can talk about what needs to be communicated when and by whom. So, you know, there are things that we know, and then there are things that we don't know. And I always say the most challenging part of any work is trying to figure out what you don't know. So it's my general suggestion to anyone in a leadership position that if you are in possession of information, you have the responsibility to share it. So the onus is on you to be proactive in figuring out how to get that information to the people who need it. And so let's talk through some of these types of information that should always be communicated. things that anybody needs to do his or her job. So where resources can be located, what deadlines are in place, what previous actions worked or didn't work. Anything that really is going to enable someone to complete their work and to get work done that will support the work of the coalition. Let's be proactive in sharing that. If we're talking about things that might impede or support working conditions or working relationships, that's really important to communicate as well. So I think about things like being able to share, if you're connecting one of your coalition members with someone who had a great experience with your organization, or someone who maybe didn't have a great experience with your organization, helping them to know that ahead of time will help prepare them for walking into that conversation or that working relationship in a way that gives them the history of what's been going on. It's a balance, because you don't want people to be too swayed by maybe something that happened in the distant past. But I think it's helpful for context for people to understand, what might be going on in terms of working relationships, where, there may have been previous difficulties with people being able to get along or work effectively together. The other two, things around someone's job performance, no one should get to an annual review and be surprised by something that's on that annual review. Ideally, we're giving immediate feedback on performance, because that's the best way to correct it, is in the moment. It's not 6 months from now at their performance review time. Because if we go 6 months without having said anything about something that didn't go well or didn't meet standards in some way, they're often very surprised and hurt by hearing about something very late, when they could have done something to fix it quite a while back. So developing some practices around quick feedback for performance are really important. And then any problems that arise among staff. Now, and I would include for coalitions, if we've got challenges in and amongst the relationships of our coalition members, we want to make sure that we're trying to deal with that proactively. And we have some resources on managing conflict that we can connect you with as well. If you've got ongoing conflict within a coalition or among staff members, that's something that we really want to communicate and address immediately in order to have really strong internal communication. The third area that supports strong internal communication is having supportive systems. So think about this within your organization, within the coalition. Your systems should be designed with strong communication in mind. And so there are a couple of different areas here that I'll talk through, and then I do have a tool that I want to share with you on the next slide as well. So in training and development, we want to include communication training in your suite of professional development opportunities for your coalition. Whether it's bringing in ECS or another service provider to talk about conflict management or different communication styles or communicating across generations, there are many ways that you can build in this kind of communication practice capacity development in your suite of training and development programs. With your supervision, think back again. We're going to practice that platinum rule. We're going to treat others the way that they want to be treated. And we're going to also make sure we're providing in the moment feedback. So don't put off providing feedback. Give that in the moment so that corrections can be made and people can move forward to developing their skills. And we think about our regular meetings. Are your meetings structured so that all voices in the room are heard? So if we look at our coalition agendas, are there opportunities for everyone to share about how they're engaging with the work of the coalition? I know that sometimes in our organization, our coalition meetings, we have a roundtable agenda item where everybody might go around and share something that their agency is working on, or that they're doing beyond the work of the coalition. And I would just encourage you to think through ways that you can structure your meetings so that everyone who is there has some sort of purpose for actually being there, other than to listen and to consume the content of the meeting. Look for ways for people to be active participants in every meeting, because that's when they will really begin to own the work of the coalition. And hopefully that begins to reduce some of your absenteeism, or reduces people showing up and expecting others to inform them or to take care of them. When we put more of the ownership of active participation back onto the coalition members, we can increase the likelihood that they'll show up prepared and ready to be engaged. And in terms of accessibility for your communication systems, are you using multiple media methods? I mean, we mentioned several different types of internal communications that you all use: email, text, phone, Google Hangouts, sticky notes, I talked about having posters on the wall. Definitely our face-to-face meetings are important as well. Think about whether or not you have social media. You may have an internal social media channel, a specified group just for your coalition members, versus a outside page that talks about everything that's going on in your coalition. Having different forms of media makes your internal communication accessible across different types of media, across different types of communication preferences as well. And check your language for clarity. Make sure that if you've got new coalition members, that if you use an acronym in the meeting, that you're defining your acronyms before or immediately right after you use those. So many of us are in different groups, different organizations, and the acronym ABC might mean one thing in one context and something else in another context. I shared that I have a master's degree in organizational development. And so when I hang out with organizational development people, we use OD as a shorthand for our degree program and that work. But when I use the term OD, when I go to my Alcohol, Drug Addiction, Mental Health Services Board meeting, OD is interpreted very differently in that group. So make sure that your language is clear when you're talking internally to your coalition members, and that everyone is clear about what you mean when you're talking about that. And the other thing I'll say around having clear language, and it goes back a little bit to the Platinum Rule, somewhat around our training and development, is to define your terms so that everyone has a clear understanding of what, for example, if we say that we are successful, what does it mean to be successful in finishing a project or in meeting a goal? Does it mean we've achieved a number? Does it mean we did something for the first time? What does that look like? What does it really mean? I'll give you the example that I use, and it's my parenting example. And this is, I stopped asking my daughter to clean her room. And I'll tell you why. Because everyone in my house, I have a husband and I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I have me. And all three of us have a really different definition of the word clean. So when I say clean, I mean one thing. When my husband says clean, he means something else. So when my daughter says clean, she means something else. So rather than telling her to clean her room, what I say is, I would like you to pick up all of the things off of your floor, make your bed, and bring your laundry to the laundry room. So that, for me, gets her room, for a teenager, clean enough. It's clean enough for me to deal with as she can find her way to her bed and get her homework done. When she thinks about cleaning her room, she thinks about taking literally every single thing out of her closet, rearranging the whole thing, hanging things up in order by the color of her shirts, the length of the sleeves. So when she thinks about cleaning her room, she thinks about something that will take hours and hours and hours. I'm really talking about, real basic stuff. So I want her to get it, just barely livable. So that's just a quick example of making sure everybody understands the definition of what you're talking about before you move forward with something. And spend time on making sure everybody's clear before you move forward, because it'll save time in the long run. When people are confused, they're going off in different directions. That's when people, their feelings get hurt because they start working on something that wasn't the right thing, and then they feel like they didn't have the best information. So you got to spend time to save time. Then I want to talk a little bit about having those occasional or institutionalized opportunities to socialize. It's really important that that people have an opportunity to develop relationships. In coalitions, this might be challenging, especially if you've got people spread over a larger geographical area. But look for ways to help people develop strong community relationships, or to see themselves as a group. And that can happen through institutionalized opportunities to socialize or occasional ones. Just make sure that they're as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. I worked in an organization that had chapter offices in multiple counties, and most folks worked in the large urban county, and I was in one of the rural outlying counties, which meant that I couldn't participate in the office book club. And so the office book club was a great opportunity for people to get to know each other and to share something. But for those of us in the outlying counties, we weren't able to attend, and we missed out on that opportunity to develop relationships with our coworkers. So so be as accessible as possible, and look for ways to develop those relationships. The final one on this list is having clear lines of communications and procedures. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of a RACI matrix before, the RACI. So I want to show you what this is. So the RACI matrix is a way of making sure that you're communicating with everybody who needs to be communicated with. This is really helpful for events or projects. So talking through this at the start of any kind of longer term event, project, program, activity that is going to involve multiple people, this would be very helpful. So the R stands for responsible. So this is a person who's going to be assigned to do the work. And making sure we're really clear about that is really important. Sometimes in coalition work, we talk about things happening, but we may not be sure if it's a responsibility of coalition members, coalition staff. So just saying the person who's going to do the work is this person. And then A is accountable. So the person who makes those final decisions and has ultimate ownership. That could, it might be your executive director, it might be your coalition chairperson, but naming who the accountable person is helpful. In smaller organizations, in maybe a smaller project team within the coalition, that responsible and accountable person might be the same person. So it may not be different, but if we're talking about a larger project, they're often not necessarily the same person. So we think about who is consulted. Who do we need to talk to find information from before the decision or action is taken? So you think about talking to your key informants about, what do they know about a particular substance? What do they know that's going on in a particular school or area? So before we start that, let's find out everything that we need to find out before we move forward on any decisions or actions. And then the I is for informed. We need to find out who needs to be informed about what's going on. These are our stakeholders. These are our community members. They're students, they're parents, they're people living in specific neighborhoods. They need to be informed about what might be going on. So if we're installing a new drug take-back location, who needs to know about that? Is it our senior population? Is it new homeowners? Who might that be? And that, so just write down who all needs to know about that. And then as you're doing your planning, this is where you can begin to engage your whole coalition in this in performing this communication task that began internally in thinking through this and is now going to move externally. So this is a way of saying, hey, we need to let the senior center know about this new drug drop box that's being installed. Who can take that information to that group, and then offer an opportunity for somebody in the coalition to take on that task. So we have the RACI matrix download on the capacity building page on the ECS website member portal. And so I'm going to type a link into the chat that'll go to that that part of the portal. If you need portal access, if you don't have that yet, just send me a quick email, or you can just go on to the website and request access. I'll get you approved today, so you can get in there and find that. We've been doing a lot of work to arrange and upload lots of resources on there. So please feel free to browse and see what all we have available for you. I'm going to move on to some external communication. Oh, wait, actually, before we do that, just benefits to working on this. Building trust, promoting fairness and equity within your organization, that helps create a climate of openness within your organization. Keeps everybody informed of what's going on, shows respect for people, that all of the information and ideas that they have to share and to share with it in each other, that it's all valuable. The more that we can practice strong internal communication, the more that we eliminate the spread of rumors, because we're communicating accurate information to everyone. And then we're saying, hey, listen, we're communicating freely to minimize our stress, to improve everyone's commitment to the overall organization goal. We can enable problem solving, because as we're communicating internally, we're getting potential problems out in the open. Having a free flow of ideas, opportunities to problem solve with the whole group, increases our effectiveness. Other people will have solutions to things that I never could have dreamed of. And so when I'm opening up internal communication, I'm making it easier to solve our problems by providing a channel for everyone's ideas. And this can also help us with change management, because it allows the organization to respond quickly and efficiently to change. It helps us move towards the same goal. And as I said earlier, the more we involve people in our meetings, the more we have a greater sense of ownership and confidence that we're all working together. So just a quick thought, though. Remember, ultimately, we only have control over our own actions and reactions. So a reflection question, you don't have to answer this now, but perhaps think about this later. In what ways do you personally contribute or detract from a good flow of information within your coalition or within your organization? So as we've talked through these practices, just think about ways that you might do better or continue to do well in some of these areas. Okay, so now we'll talk about external communication. And I'm sure this is part of your action plan. So go ahead and share in the chat some of the ways that you communicate externally in your organization. This might be social media, press release. So it's really what we need to do is just make sure that we're focused so that we're productive with all of these things. Because when we communicate externally, we can communicate our goals and objectives so that people can understand how it is that we're working towards a safe, healthy community and how they can get involved. We can inform and influence others, so we can, help people make healthier decisions, or we can help them to understand how to get help if they need it. We can generate resources. So if we need more volunteers, or if we're looking for additional funding, or if we're looking for meeting space or partnerships, this is all ways that our strong external communication is so important. And partnerships, they allow us to work with others to reach our goals, but also to learn from others and make adjustments as we acquire new information. So anytime we have information to share, we need to think through how we're going to process this externally. So I want to consider some key groups: the community you serve, other organizations, and the media. So, the community you serve might be both a geographic community, but also maybe an interest group within a community. Other organizations can be your partner organizations, or it could be organizations that are not natural partners, but are definitely impacted by your work. Thinking particularly about business community. I know we're trying to do more and more to reach out to our business communities to help them see how they're assisting in our prevention efforts ultimately makes the community stronger, makes it a better place for them to do their business. And of course, the media, knowing how to write good press releases to reach our traditional media, but also, finding ways maybe to engage with newer types of media, and maybe podcasts or, internet broadcasts. There's some new ways that we can communicate externally using our media sources. So I want to talk through some steps to strong external communication, and I won't go through absolutely every one of these in detail, but we want to talk about identifying your audience that's most important to your effort. It's not always going to be the same audience every single time for every message. In a coalition that I'm involved with around housing and homelessness, we have a big event every year that does outreach to folks who are at risk of or experiencing homelessness. And we have several different types of audiences that we're trying to reach with our messaging. We're trying to reach people that we want to come to the event to receive services. We're also trying to reach donors, and we're trying to reach potential volunteers and partners. So there are different types of communications that we do for each of those audiences. And we really do, we're saying the same thing about the event itself, but we want people to engage in it in slightly different ways. So we have to design that message in a way that makes most sense and is relevant to those audiences, and use some different types of methods. So we use social media, print media, radio station, television whenever possible. There are different ways of reaching all of those folks. And we also spread the word through just person to person, word of mouth, either through social workers or through other service providers. So we have to be able to describe different kinds of materials that we'll use to transmit the message. So I might want some flyers, I might want some public service announcements to be played on the radio. There are different ways or different kinds of materials that work best to reach different types of audiences. Of course, all of this has to involve some sort of financial resource. So it may be a gift in kind in terms of someone supporting a billboard, or it might be a gift in kind of a radio spot. But we do need to factor in what kind of financial resources that we need to do our communication external to the coalition. We also have to have a time frame. So, messages are going to be effective in certain time frames around an event. Telling somebody about an event today that's not going to happen until October, it may plant a seed, but really not telling them about it now and then not really doing anything else until September is probably not the best way to make sure they're aware of it. So thinking about what's my ideal time frame around an event, around an activity, or is this something where I want to do kind of a drip marketing where I have just a little drip of information on a constant basis to reinforce a message over and over and over again. So depending on which audience you're trying to reach, you want to look at different time frames for communicating that message. As soon as you're ready, get your plan going, implement your plan, set it in motion, and then understand that adjustments might be necessary later on. Because as we begin maybe putting up flyers, we realize we're not reaching the audience we need to. So we need to do a different type of outreach for that particular audience. It's better to get it started and adjust as you go along rather than to wait for the perfection plan because perfect is the enemy of good, and that means that things will never get done if we're waiting for everything to be perfect. So just know starting out that you're going to need that you will make adjustments, and that those adjustments will help you get your message out in the way that it needs to go. Of course, we do have a communication plan template on our member portal, and encourage you to use this. You can certainly download it, adapt it as you need to. I'll plug the link in the chat again so that you can go onto the ECS member portal and download that resource or any other resource that you might like. But we have that communication plan, and ours is, it's labeled evaluation, but this could be a communication plan for an event or an activity as well. Think about your audience. What do they care about? What kind of information do they need? How will I get the information to give to them? And then how am I going to share it out for them? So all of those are easy questions to ask, and this would be a good activity to do within a coalition meeting. Again, engage all the folks in the room in answering these questions and then beginning to own the work that will flow out of that. So it's not just laying it on staff to get these things done, but this walking through a communication plan template or another tool like this in a team meeting can give everybody an opportunity to engage with planning this out and then and taking on the work as they leave.